All right, welcome.
Good to go, Drew. Hey, everybody. Happy Wednesday, everyone. Thank you for making time to be here. Welcome, friends, IRL and URL. Today, we're fortunate to have two important members of the broadband community and the random third guy in a trucker hat that just asked for 5 minutes of your time. To say thank you all for making time to connect and for all of the important work that you're doing to help others to do the same. And to share a few tools and resources that can help force multiply your efforts. It's a real honor to get to spend time with you all here in Washington, D.C. And speaking of Washington, D.C., thank you, Washington, for your leadership, for the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to right a great wrong, for a new era when all Americans, urban and rural, get their shot to compete, what Catherine Boyle calls American dynamism, in the new global economy, in the remote era that COVID accelerated. And thank you for a vision that's big and bold enough to get the job done, and for cross-sector action that matches that vision. Drew Clark, for those of you who don't know, you should. He's a special human being. Few work as tirelessly as Drew do towards his mantra of better broadband, better lives. And he's also an all-around great dude. And Drew will introduce a very special guest soon. But I would like to say, I think as a nation, we're very lucky to have Alan Davidson helming the hardworking NTIA. He's experienced in the kind of nuanced cross-sector collaboration it's going to take to make the most of the investment. And he knows how to involve the private sector to force multiply efforts. We know you and the NTIA have a lot on your shoulders and that you're working your tails off. And I think I speak for many who couldn't be happier that it's you and the NTIA flagshipping the IIJA's broadband programs. And it also can't be easy to figure out how, and quickly at that, to put that kind of money to work. But we do want to put in a shout out for local broadband. As Farm Fresh broadband author Christopher Ali said in his AMA with us last week, local broadband is the best broadband. And last year in Houston, NTIA's Scott Woods called this your moonshot. On moonshots, NASA just partnered with SpaceX. And now Americans are back in space, not on Russian rockets this time, at a far lower cost structure than anything NASA did on its own. Plus, the astronauts get to ride up to the rocket in Tesla X's, which is pretty cool. NTIA's ARA and BTOP funding, a partnership between a rural electric cooperative and private sector, is why my hometown friends can get fiber to the farm that's far better than anything I can get a couple of miles outside of Silicon Valley at a fraction of the cost. But as with all moonshots, if we get this wrong, we may not get another chance to get it right. At Broadband.money, our job is to help local broadband win. Community networks, co-ops, mom and pops, tribes, all should team up with the communities they serve and rise up to get their share. Each of the more than 600 Broadband.money applicants is unique, but they share one goal: to connect more families and businesses to better broadband. And we believe the lion's share of the funding should go local. The local is the pathway to the highest and best ROI for our historic public investment. And that collaborative software and data tools to build informed applications should be in everyone's hands. In states, we hear the challenges you face getting ready for the coming tsunami. We built Broadband.money to help you solve the massive constrained optimization problem, tools for gathering and analyzing thousands of informed applications, and applications that should be thoughtful, well-composed, and compliant, even if the applicant doesn't have a huge team. They must not be static PDFs. Strong applications need multiple stakeholders working iteratively in a collaborative environment to explore the highest and best outcomes. And local providers have one killer advantage. They're in touch with the community. They care. You can and should get your share of upcoming programs if you're local. To help, we've put all the tools you'll need to build the strongest possible application together in one place. You can research your area, see it from a variety of different lenses, team up with great partners in the community, and save time finding great financial partners. By that, I mean you apply once and you get dozens of match capital providers looking to deploy billions of dollars into grant-backed broadband opportunities like yours. And if 25% is a floor on the match capital, then aggregate is north of $10 billion. There's a lot of need. Knowing how to optimize capital means public and private funders must be on the same page. This tool gives you a common language and yield on cost. And for winners, Broadband.money automates ongoing grant reporting and compliance so you can better focus on serving more subscribers. Even turnkey ACP, so you can help families in need with seamless subscriber experience. While some say wait on new maps, we think communities and local providers should get ready now to do your own research, to amplify community voice, to form alliances, to line up the match capital you're going to need to get ready, the tools and data to make the most of your time, effort, and money, to help those local partnerships get their share, and to help make the most of the historic public investment. From where should the money go, delivering well-researched, thoughtful applications that are consistent with rules, answered once, not dozens of times, to where the money will go. And to do that quickly and smartly is to be multi-stakeholder collaborative environment is necessary. Like Google Docs changed the way we collaborate. And for ongoing reporting and compliance to say where did the money go, one-touch reporting that integrates to the provider stack for on-demand, independently verifiable active measurements and reports to comply with NTIA, state, and local guidelines. Cross-sector partnerships force multiply NTIA's impact, and software and data can help. The thing I personally love most, Alan, is that you're committed to 100% access for all, not 95%, not the low-hanging cherries, that you get it, that every American should get a shot. You said that, and I love that. And in this remote era, access for all is the bedrock of liberty and justice for all. To build the America that poet laureate and future POTUS Amanda Gorman said, they called benevolent but bold, fierce and free. In her words, and she's much better at saying it than I am, obviously. We must lift our gazes not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first, we must first put our differences aside. Drew Clark, ladies and gentlemen.
Jace, thank you so much. We are so happy to have each of you here and to join with Alan Davidson to address the topic of the day, preparing for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And I really couldn't be happier that we have a speaker of this caliber. We've been doing this Broadband Breakfast Live online for more than 2 years since the pandemic started. Of course, it built upon the Broadband Breakfast Club before. I suspect you've heard of, or at least been around for.
How long has it been? How many years? I mean,
yeah, it's.
We're not saying how many years, but we were both teenagers at the time, right? Yeah.
But Alan, it's so delightful to have you with us to talk about, the way I said it in that recent article, the bottom of the stack, internet. And you've, of course, worked at the top of the internet stack, too. But your career has been throughout the domain, from Center for Democracy and Technology, where we met 24 years ago, to working with Google, indeed setting up Google's office in Washington, D.C., working in the Department of Commerce, the same place you're in now, but in a different portfolio. And then, of course, with the Mozilla Foundation. So just briefly, Alan, what do you take from those experiences that you hope will be most instrumental in implementing the most significant NTIA program ever?
So no pressure, right? Yeah. Well, let me start by saying, first of all, thank you for having me today. It's great to be here. I have been a long time follower and fan of the Broadband Breakfast Club, and then the Broadband Breakfast for Lunch Club. Yes, I missed all the iterations, but it is great, and it's hard to believe it's been 24 years. And I will say, I remember very vividly, those early conversations we had at a different, simpler time in the internet. But also over the years, I have really come to value people who really kind of dig deep and understand the issues, and then ask, and either report or talk about it from that perspective. And Drew, you have been for years one of those people who gets it, and who even in those early days, I always valued talking to you because you were somebody who really took the time to understand the issues. So it's great to be here with you again today. Yeah, no, I really. It is, and I'll also just step back. I have stuff to say. It's an exciting time to be at NTIA, kind of a historic time. And as you said, we've been given this opportunity, right? It's hard to think about the fact that we've been talking about the digital divide in this country for over 20 years. And there's been a lot of work done, but we finally, thanks to this bipartisan infrastructure law, we've finally been given the resources to do something really serious and structural to close the digital divide. And that is a massive opportunity. It is, people talk about once in a generation, once in a lifetime, but to do something, this is like rural electrification. This is like building an interstate highway system. This is a moment, as we were saying earlier already, and thank you for that introduction, this is a moment to really bring opportunity to everyone in America, to think, how can you thrive in the modern economy today without being able to get access to the internet? And we know that also the set of programs we've been given is giving us an opportunity to think not just about access, but also about affordability, about adoption. How do we make sure that people are meaningfully online? So that is a massive and amazing opportunity, and we're extremely excited to be working on this. And for those of you who've been in this space for many years too, right? I mean, how incredible is it that this is, one of the top priorities now for our president, for our government, for people in Congress. I will say that we're also trying to walk and chew gum at NTIA at the same time.
You have many other responsibilities,
Right.
and we said we're not going to talk about those because there's so much on IIJ. But
Right.
just say a word or
Just to
two
give,
about
for
those
those
other
who know,
things.
other things, among the other top priorities for us, we've got, we're doing a lot of work on spectrum. We have this statutory mission at NTIA to coordinate federal spectrum policy, to coordinate and manage federal spectrum, figuring out how we make sure that there's efficient and effective use of that federal spectrum while also fueling the needs of commercial industry, of the private sector to have access to spectrum. That's a huge ongoing challenge, and we're right in the middle of that. We're doing a huge amount of work around the policy issues having to do with the internet, both internationally and domestically. We do a lot of work on cybersecurity, privacy, 5G vendor diversity is a big, very big initiative for us. We're doing a lot of work around the ITU, International Telecommunications Union. There's an election this year for the head of the ITU. There's an American, Doreen Bogdan-Martin, who we're quite excited about. That'd be a really historic first woman to ever head the ITU, which is amazing. Anyway, so there's a lot on our plate, and public safety communications, FirstNet, managing, doing the oversight of FirstNet, and that's an amazing project. So we've got a lot. We have a lot going on, but this, to come back to it, broadband is job one.
So how are you managing that? How are you staffing up to deal with? I mean, this is a program that's 10 times bigger than the more than 10 times bigger than the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds for broadband. And your agency is getting the lion's share of those, 42.5 billion plus 1 billion, 3 billion. We'll talk about those. So how are you kind of prioritizing the staffing and the administration of the program?
To start with, we're hiring. If you know good people, we are, and that's really actually probably been my biggest focus in the near term, has been trying to get to is the talent surge that we know we need to be able to deliver on this. And there's a core group of great people who've been at NTIA for years, and that's partly why I think Congress felt that we should have this support and this funding. But we now need that surge. One of the key places, and so we're building out across the board. We're building out in our digital. We just recently hired a new head of digital equity. Scott Woods here is in the audience. He heads our office of minority broadband communication. Yes, there you go. He's building his team. We're doing work. I think one of the biggest places that we're investing is in the folks who are going to be working with the states. And you all understand this. The way that the infrastructure bill has been written, the biggest program we're overseeing, the state grant program, is really going to require us to partner with states. And it means we need to have a good partner in the states.
Right.
One of the things that we can do to support that is build out, and we're building out a pretty big team of folks who will be the kind of one-stop shop for states. Every state is going to have a person at NTIA who they know they can call, and a person who wakes up every day and thinks, how do I make sure that Texas succeeds here? How do I make sure that North Carolina is getting its letter of intent in, knows what it needs to do for its initial plan? So we're going to have that kind of customer service mentality and be able to create that. And that's, I think, one of the most important things we're building.
So Alan, I kind of have to put my personal hat on because as I believe you know, I ended up working in Illinois as the state broadband initiative director for that state. It's kind of 1.0, right? The
Right.
ARA.
Yeah.
Now that program gave money to state mapping entities to map, but also what I discovered there is it was much more than mapping. It was really more about coordinating and interacting. So talk just a little bit more about the role of these state broadband officials, why they're so important, and how much discretion are you going to give them when you put out the notice of funding opportunity rules next month?
Well, I think the broadband offices are going to be in the states are going to be the key front line for a lot of this work, right? And again, the way that the $42.5 billion state grant program, the BEAD program, as we call it, Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, the big ticket item that we've got here, the way that works is it really is about us doing allocations to states, and states will do the grant making. So that means we need to have states in a position to be able to run those grant programs. We expect there will be flexibility. Different states are going to run programs in different ways. And our goal is to give them, the statute gives them that flexibility. It's not a one size fits all at all. So that means you need state broadband offices that are in the position to run these allocations and to do it well, because doing it well will make a very big difference. They're also, the statute requires, and we will require, that they do this in consultation with local communities, because we know that communities are the ones who really understand, where are the gaps, who are the communities that are unserved, how do we get local providers involved? And so that communication, just as you said, is going to be critical. So that it's going to place a lot, and that's not to say that there's not, to also mention that there's a digital equity program that we're going to be running. The states are going to be very involved in that as a component of that. So there's a lot for them to do.
Right. Jace Wilson here of Broadband.money highlighted the really importance of local. And that's why we're so excited to be partnering and working with Broadband.money, because it is about making sure that funds go to local entities. Now, again, I know there's no kind of, well, there may be some preferences for local, right? But there's no bar against local cities or communities or co-ops getting funds, correct?
That is absolutely correct. The statute is very clear on that, and that there is no bar on those entrants into the program. And but like I said, there's also going to be requirements for consultation. States will need to consult with you all?
No,
with local communities.
So how does that work?
Of their plan.
How does that work? What do they need to do exactly to consult?
Well, it's something we've actually asked for comments on, and we're thinking about how we would put this in. But the statute, again, is pretty clear that it has to be, but the initial plan that gets submitted to us, the final plans about how money is being spent, that need to be, both of which need to be approved by us, need to include a local consultation component. And so that's been a very active area, and we've gotten a lot of comments about that.
And so that's a consultation for the applicant, the sub-applicants who are applying to the states, right? Or is it a requirement for the applicants, meaning the state broadband entities?
It's a requirement for the state broadband entities in the statute.
Okay.
So,
okay.
And that's what I was talking about, but we were hoping there'll be a lot of consultation all along the way. Right?
Now you said several times here and in other forums that the statute's very clear. Of course, it's complicated, but it's clear. So what are the open questions that you all are in the midst of fine tuning as you prepare the notice of funding opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would look to, it's a good answer, the requests for comments that we put out, and we received a lot of them. And no surprise, there are areas that we do want people's input on and have gotten a lot of input on. One area, of course, is around affordability and the low-cost option. There's a requirement in the law that the state program, that states include a low-cost option as a requirement for their grantees. How that should be defined, who should be eligible, that's going to be an active area. That's an active area of conversation we're quite interested in getting input on. This issue of local consultation, which is a requirement in the statute, but not heavily defined. So how would we think about that? Those are the kinds of issues that, and then we're also kind of really working through the questions of timelines and processes. Some of it's kind of the mechanical pieces, but they make a big difference about how we do it as well.
Do you have any more insight into timelines other than that May 16th date that is the deadline?
Well, and I should say at the top, sadly not able to share any, non-public information here. We stay tuned
You
for
could
more.
you could make it
I
public
could
right
make
now.
news, but we're being quite careful. The biggest thing is the starting gun for us will be May 16th, right? That's our statutory deadline for putting out these notices. And,
Yes.
and it's not just the notice on the BEAD program, on the state grant program, but our digital equity program, our middle mile program will also have notices coming out. I know our digital equity program is due a little bit later.
You got another month or so.
But that's going to be the starting gun. And if you look at the statute, it does spell out a process where we get letters of intent from states. We hope they'll be submitting them very quickly. We expect that some of them will. Then immediately we're able to give them $5 million planning grants so that they can which I think will such a very wise thing to add in. Yeah, we actually have money for planning, so states can do that. I'm sure you would like that back in the day. And then we go from there.
We had money for planning, which was just called mapping, right?
Right.
It was called mapping, and we did mapping too, but planning was part of that, right? Whereas now we've got this bifurcation where the mapping, so to speak, is going over to the FCC,
right?
And yet the planning is being done by the states.
Right.
Do you want to comment any more on the mapping piece?
Well, I'll just say, when you think about the timeline, and again, this is spelled out in the statute, but it's not necessarily clear. And this is the way we, is that, there'll be these letters of intent, we'll give out the planning grants. States immediately will be working on their 5-year plans, and then they can work on their initial plans that they'll submit to us. But a lot of this is ultimately dependent on the mapping that is being done, as you said, by the FCC. And so our allocations, the way the statute works is the way we will ultimately decide how much money each state gets depends on those maps, because those maps will tell us how many unserved locations are in each state, and that is the formula function. So we'll be dependent on that.
Well, that's kind of the definitive word, so to speak, on what's unserved. But there are mapping tools. Obviously, we've heard and seen about them that are available right now for people. So it's not a requirement for applicants to. I mean, this is more kind of a check,
right?
Or is it really more central to the process? Those maps that the FCC is doing.
I mean, I think the maps are pretty central to the process. I think the way we read the statute, we've all been tasked with using the FCC maps, and there's a good reason for it, right? Which is that in the past, as many of you all follow this know, the maps have kind of sucked. Actually, that's a term of art, but the maps haven't been great. And using census blocks as our basis hasn't been the kind of granularity that we need in this day and age. And so, there was money given to the FCC. There's an approach, and we're going to use the map. We'll have a source of truth in those maps, but it's going to take a little while, and that's where one of the gating items for us. So they are central, by the way, because that's going to be how we decide, how the government decides how allocations are given.
Every state gets 100 million, and it's everything above that.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah. $100 million for every state. Less for the territories are 25 million. It's split 100 million basically. And on top of that, it will depend on a formula that is largely based on how many unserved locations there are relative to all the unserved locations in the country. So states with a lot of unserved locations, relatively speaking, will get more money. Will get well more than $100 million.
What do you think the high amount will be?
I don't know. I have nothing definitive to add. It will certainly be a lot. It'll be hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Okay. We have the opportunity.
There are a lot of good estimates out there. I refer you to that. Yeah.
We have a great opportunity here to have questions. We've been compiling questions at Broadband.money, and of course we'll have the opportunity for each of you to ask questions. Before I open it up to you and to others here, I just want to quickly touch upon the unserved versus underserved distinction, Alan. Okay, so the statute, of course, defines unserved as not receiving 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up, and underserved as not receiving 100 megabits down, 20 megabits up. So, and of course, again, the statute requires the 25.3 areas, or the lack of 25.3, being filled in first, and then the 100, 200 areas. But a lot of projects are going to cover both unserved and underserved areas. So what's the current thinking on how you design a project that's going to serve underserved and unserved areas?
I think, well, I'll start by saying it's a really interesting area, and it kind of gets to the complexity of the entire problem, because we are committed. Our goal is that 100% goal, right? Our goal that has been expressed, the president has said it, Secretary Raimondo at the Commerce Department has said it. We are eager to get to, our goal is to get to everyone in America and to have access to high-speed, affordable broadband.
Everyone to have access to 120 broadband.
And when we're done, that is the mission we have been given.
Right.
Is that when this program is done, everyone in America will have access to high-speed, affordable broadband, and that is as defined in this statute as 120.
Great.
So I mean, it's an ambitious goal.
That's very encouraging.
Right?
Very
no,
encouraging.
that is, so we are looking at it through that lens. And it is about how can we use this money well to get there. And it's ambitious. Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah.
And we all know that. And you know, so we're thinking about it, and we want to make sure that the projects are economical, but where our laser focus is on making sure that those unserved areas get that upgrade or are reached.
Okay, we got a question here from Darren Farnan. Alan, how will the NTIA preference specific groups, namely electric cooperatives?
Well, I think the short answer is that we're not going to be preferencing specific groups. I think our statute is very clear, and we are open to all comers, right? And I think different states will build this in different ways. But what we're going to be making clear, because the statute makes it clear, is there's a wide variety of participants that are desired and that we want. And in some places, it could very well be electric cooperatives. And in other places, it might be other new entrants. It may be existing part players. It may be municipal players, right? As you were saying at the beginning. And the statute is very clear about this. Congress expressed its intent, and we want to make sure we're making sure that there's space for all those folks, because it will be different in different places. And we know that.
Do you have any indication that some states won't file an acceptable plan?
Our fervent hope, we are going to be working to make sure that every state is a participant here. We can't get to our goal. We can't meet our mission if every state is not there.
Right.
So when I talked in the beginning about really where we're investing and the fact that we're investing so heavily in that work with the states, it's for that reason, to make sure that we're working directly with the states, that we're bringing them on, we're giving them the technical assistance that they need to be able to be participants.
What would you like them to know or to do? What should states do to be as prepared as they could be?
You know, reach out. Operators are standing by. You know, and actually, I don't think they need me to say that, because I know that our teams are in touch with them. We had a state broadband leaders network meeting last month. We had 46 of the 50 states participating. We had, I think, maybe all of the territories participating. Yeah. We've got a network already that we've built, but I do think there is a need probably for political leadership to be engaging too and understand the importance of this. This is a win. This is such a win, I think, for, you know, there's not a state in this country that's not going to win in some way from this project.
What do you say to those who believe that the NTIA is going to have to inevitably step in and sort of put really strong guidelines, at least? I mean, you have sort of emphasized this is not a one size fits all. Maybe more rural states might come in with more acceptable use of wireless, whereas Rhode Island, for example, is probably not going to. Could you just talk a little bit about this state versus NTIA federal role?
Well, I mean, we expect that there will be flexibility, that it's not, again, not a one size fits all. We know, you said it well, the needs of a state like Rhode Island, which we talk about a lot in our buildings, since my boss was a former governor in Rhode Island. But the needs of a place like Rhode Island, which probably isn't going to end up having a lot of unserved, right, are going to be really different. The way they use their $100 million will be very different than the way, and I say $100 million, it could be more, but I suspect that's probably what they'll have.
Well, Department of Commerce is chaired, is run. by
Our
Rhode
formula,
Islanders, so-
fortunately, our formula is very clear. How they use the money in Rhode Island is going to be vastly different than what we expect in Alaska or Montana, right?
Yeah.
And so we just have to, we know we have to give that flexibility. At the same time, there are a set of requirements in the statute. Yeah. And we expect states to meet those requirements. If they submit plans that don't meet those requirements, we won't be approving them.
Let's talk as well about the issue of the match, right? Now, is it 20 or 25%?
25%.
25. And I think you said that that's a floor, not a ceiling. Could you elaborate on that, Alan?
Well, you may have heard me speculate on this question, I should say, but it is an interesting thing, and the statute talks about the match requirement, and it's a 25% match requirement for projects funded, again, by our state grant program. And we noticed that we've gotten a lot of comments about like when we might waive the statute, so there's a lot of commentary about that. But we also got a lot of comments about, and have gotten input on the fact that in some cases, 25% match might not be the right number. Maybe it should be more, right? Maybe states should seek that what states really should be thinking about, and I say the backdrop for this is we are keenly focused on the fact that $42 billion doesn't go as far as it used to. No, I shouldn't say that. We want to be good stewards of this money, but also we are really clear-eyed about that fact that the money we've been given, it's going to be hard to do that 100% mission, right? And we want to get every American the best broadband that we can. So to do that, we have to use this money wisely, and we have to make it go as far as we can. And we know that in some places, a provider might be willing to provide, to do a build out with less than with more than a 25% match. They might be willing to pay half if they could get half the cost of the project covered by the government, they're more than willing to do the other half of the project. It's just, which makes sense, right? There's projects that are not happening now that are very close to economically viable.
Right.
So
it's almost like a little reverse auction thinking here. Would you?
Well, I'd say the reverse auction that the FCC did
in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, right? That has been much criticized.
It has been much criticized, but one of the interesting takeaways from this, as just an observer of that, is it gave us some interesting data about what providers at least said they would be willing to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact number, but I've read that it's somewhere, north of 50% match on average in the RDOF program, in that FCC program. So that tells you that there are a lot of folks out there who, if you just gave them a little bit more support, they would be willing to do that next deployment. We know there's going to be a broad range. So I think you can see how some states have approached this in other settings, where they've really focused on the cost to the state of getting the project built out. And I think that's going to be an important metric. So anyway, so that's the thinking.
No, this is a fascinating topic, and I think it's a good one just to linger on for one more moment, which is to say a state could say we're going to set a threshold of 50% match. Correct? The state would be permitted to do that.
The states are going to submit plans. I don't know that we're going to. That's certainly not something the statute is very clear. 25% match is what minimum is what's in there. But the question of whether different states would approach that in different ways or have sliding scales or reward, that's going to be something you could imagine states could do for sure.
Okay.
So that'll be interesting. So to see what plans we get from states.
And how are you thinking of treating state plans on the separate question of their reliance on the map, the FCC map? So for instance, could a state say, well, we're going to go by our map as opposed to the FCC's map? Is that going to be allowed or not?
I don't know the answer to that question. I think that may be something that we're
thinking about.
Well, I actually just don't even know it strikes me that the statute is, I know the statute's clear about allocation. I actually don't know the answer about whether, my impression, I should say, from the statute is that states will also need to look to the FCC maps for authoritative information about where unserved locations are. anyway, beyond
Yeah.
that, I think, this is an area where we've been accepting comment and interested in, yeah.
This builds on a question that Sarah Sterland, deputy editor at Broadband.money, asks, which is that.
Hi, Sarah.
And
Sarah, right.
you know Sarah. She wrote about you once you moved over to Google and of course at National Journalistic.
Former colleague,
yeah,
sure.
So Sarah is talking about how, at Broadband.money, we're realizing that many community members are worrying about endless legal challenges by incumbents endlessly challenging grant applicants from smaller, less funded competitors. And are there any mechanisms that you can see or can imagine within the constraints of IIJA that would limit those challenges?
That's an interesting question. I know that it's been raised. It's something that the team is thinking about. I guess I would just say my hope is that that it will be very clear to everybody how valuable these programs are, and that to the states too, and that our hope is that there'll be a lot of participants here and a lot of folks who can't participate, and it would be a real shame if litigation got in the way. We're of course going to do everything we can to make sure that again, that's why you hear me talking about the statute so much. We've been given clear guidance by Congress. We believe we're going to be putting out a program that fits in that follows that guidance, that framework really closely. And I think the law is pretty clear. So.
Yeah. Let's also give an opportunity for our folks in the room. If any of you have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll try to include you in the mix. Okay, I see a hand in the back. So go ahead and identify yourself and speak loudly so we can hear.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Alan. I'm Mr. Davidson, Administrator Davidson, for doing this here.
Alan was okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's great.
And so I am Louis Perez, Vice President of Policy for WISP, Wireless Internet Service Providers Association. I want to thank you and your staff, folks like Russ Hanser, Catherine Bates, Sarah, I'm going to mess up her last name, it starts with a B, and the Office of Internet Connectivity and Growth. Yeah. Have been very generous with their time in meeting with us even before we put out the request for comments. So, and if there's any way that we can be a resource to you or to your staff, please let us know. What I did want to ask about yet another obligation that you have that the IIJA gave you, which is to determine what are high cost areas. So high cost areas that are not just subject to the $30 subsidy, but could also be entitled to the $75 subsidy. The IIJA also does something for the first time in terms of requiring you to coordinate with the FCC on that. WISPA has filed comments with the FCC, and so we're just trying to find a little bit more information about how you plan to coordinate with the FCC in determining which areas meet the definition of high cost and therefore would be entitled to the $75 subsidy.
A great point. High cost. That's a term of art now. How are you parsing that?
So I mean, that's definitely an area that we're working on. That's going to be part of the guidance that we'll be putting out. There is that 10% set aside for high cost locations, and really all I could say is we've been talking. We are now. But we put a lot of energy into our conversations with the FCC and our relationship with the FCC. I will say as an aside, that hasn't always been perfect between NTIA and FCC from what I understand and before my time. But I have the chairwoman and I have invested quite a bit in. I called her on my second day in the office. We've been talking regularly, very regularly, I should say, on a range of issues, including these broadband issues. So this is an area where we're going to be collaborating quite a bit. And I'd also just say thank you for the shout out to the team. You kind of name checked some of our star players, and we do have a team that's really cares about engaging the folks. Hopefully, many of you had a chance to talk to them. They've been just deeply committed to this and in this field for years, and it's a cause, right, as much as a job. But to your point, though, that's going to be a very important determination for us in understanding. And I do think states will treat those high cost areas probably in different ways. We expect that, but that's going to be, I think, an area where different states are going to have different numbers of them and really have different challenges there.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit, Alan, about cost, digital equity, and some of the issues associated with adoption of broadband, right? So the 42.5 in the BEAD program is pretty much in access, infrastructure and access, although you have pointed out there's a low cost requirement to that. Could you speak a little bit about how the Digital Equity Act, the 2.75 billion that's included in IIJ, works with and connects to the broader BEAD program?
So we have this Digital Equity Act, $2.75 billion. There's a state grant part of it, and there'll be a competitive grant part of it. The way the statute works is it rolls out over several years, starting with state capacity grants. And the purposes there are quite broad around addressing some of the structural issues around digital equity. So I like to say that I think the Digital Equity Act is kind of like the beating heart of our effort. And it goes back to our idea that many of you know, which is this has to be about more than just access and deployment, right? We can get a wire or a connection to somebody's home, but if they can't afford it, it doesn't do them any good. If they can afford it, but they don't have a device to get online, it doesn't do them any good. If they have the device, but they still don't, there's no reason for them to get online. They don't understand what to do when they're online. There are no applications that are helping them online. They're not in their language online, then we haven't met our goal. So our ultimate goal here is meaningful adoption. And these are the tools we're going to use along the way. The beauty of being given these set of programs is we're trying to braid them together. And we're not just thinking about affordability and adoption and equity in the context of the Digital Equity Act. We think about it in the context of the BEAD program too, right? Because we have this affordability option, low cost option, I should say. We're thinking about structural affordability and how we can support that in the program. And we're keenly interested in using other programs too, to take something like the Middle Mile program.
Yeah, let's talk about that $1 billion.
$1 billion, which, normally for NTIA, that would be a very, very exciting program. And it's been dwarfed by these other programs. But the truth is, we're extremely excited about the Middle Mile program. First of all, that is, when you look at the timelines in the statute, and it's all in the statute right now, that happens quite quickly, right? There's not a planning process. It's not waiting for match from the FCC. So we anticipate that program moving forward pretty fast. And it's a real force multiplier. If we do good middle mile, it enables us to do, it enables those last mile connections.
Right.
And so in some ways, the sequencing is quite lucky for us. But from our point of view, the fact is middle mile looks like, let's say, a force multiplier that will help us with these affordability and deployment projects down the road.
So the Recovery Act of 13 years ago really ended up being a middle mile program, right? And this one, by contrast, is a last mile program with this, 1 billion middle mile tacked on. Could you just speak a little bit about that and tie it in, if you don't mind, Alan, to what's your vision for the program? What does success look like? How will that be measured in 5, 10, 20 years?
Right. It's a great question. I mean, I think success for all of this has been is based on that mission that we've been given, which is to start by connecting everyone in America, the everyone _ the everyone, with affordable, high-speed internet service. And that's a pretty ambitious goal, right? And I hate to put the bar so high for us, but that's the bar, that's the mission we've been given, right? And so that's our starting point. I would say that's not our end point, though. I think the goal, as I said, is also meaningful adoption, meaningful use in that space, right? That it can't just be about a wire going past somebody's house, and not just a wire, a connection to somebody's home.
Right.
It's gotta also be the tools for them to be able to participate in the digital economy. So yeah, so no pressure, but that's the bar. That's how we'll measure success.
So
and we'll have milestones along the way. We've got a lot of milestones along the way.
Well, and I want to ask about the milestones. Our reporter, Broadband Breakfast, Theodore Soder, asks, what challenges do you foresee? And if I could add something to that, specific challenges in this point we've been talking about, the Digital Equity Act and integrating into the BEAD program?
So I'd say part of our challenge is going to be complexity. I do think that the program that's been put in place by Congress is complicated. Just even as we're talking about it today, and you folks are all pretty informed, right? And to think about how are we going to help states? I think the biggest challenge will probably be that state challenge. We know that some states are very far along and very sophisticated about this, have invested a lot in their broadband offices. We know that other states are just beginning. And so that's going to be one of the biggest challenges we have for sure. And then, helping them really with the technical assistance they need. The same thing with communities. We know that local communities are going to be important, engaged, not necessarily as providers, what I mean is as partners, as helping give input to the states, be part of the programs, be part of these digital equity programs. And do they have the capacity? Do they have people who understand high-speed internet?
We have just a few more minutes for Alan before we have to let him go to other commitment. We have opportunity for one more question from the audience. I see a hand back there. Go ahead and speak loudly.
Critical Infrastructure Partners. We are a startup. We were about ready to close our first deal between New York and New Jersey. We provide private capital to fiber lines. So a two-part question. One, read a little bit that debate that maybe there's not enough money in the middle of all fiber. I've seen comments like that.
Not enough money in what?
Middle and long haul fiber from the federal government. What role do you see private capital playing in that? And then secondarily, you see NTIA serving as a conduit, unintended, to some degree, to partner private investment with middle and long haul opportunities that you have.
First of all, I think we view private capital as kind of an essential component here. And when you hear us talking, for example, about like the match I know those are in the last mile programs a lot, but that's us thinking about how can we make sure that the capital we know is coming in is being deployed wisely and that we're taking the advantage of what we know is coming in. Our hope is that people see the opportunity, right? That there is there's going to be a lot of funding for CapEx here from the federal government, and that there's our sense is that's attracting the capital.
Is it just CapEx or can it also fund OpEx too?
Well, that's an interesting question. I probably misspoke when I said that.
It was a question I was thinking to ask.
Yeah.
When you asked CapEx, I was going,
Right.
Obviously it will be for capital expenditures.
Right. But the question of what are the other uses is something that we'll be spelling out in our program. Yeah.
Well, we're really grateful that you've joined us for this time, Alan. We want to give you an opportunity to share any final thoughts you have about what our audience here and online and in the Broadband.money community can be looking towards in preparing for the IIJA.
Well, I just say I think we need your partnership. I think we view this as we keep calling it an all-of-government approach to start, because we know there's a lot of different parts of the government involved here. Where NTIA is a big piece of this, but we're working with the FCC, we're working with Treasury and U.S. Department of Agriculture, and there's a lot of other funders out there. But we're hoping to make this easy for people because we know the American people aren't making a distinction between whether the money comes from NTIA or FCC or whoever, right? They just know that they need access, and it's going to require a lot of partnership with states, and it's going to require really all of you. I think it is about making sure that we get participation from private providers, that people are engaging and doing the build out on these things. And I just keep thinking, it's incredible on some level for those of us who've been in this space for a while to think, here we are in 2022 in a country as successful as our country, and that there's still all of these communities that are not online. And how can that be true in this country at this time? COVID has shown us how important this is. And this is a generational moment. Generations before us, electrified the country, built the interstate highway system. This is going to be our moment. This is our thing. This is our chance to connect people to really to address these longstanding inequities in our society, rural communities that have been left behind, low-income communities, communities of color that have been left behind. This is a huge tool for addressing those big problems in our society and for making our economy more resilient. So all of those things, this is an incredible moment, and it's going to take all of us, the people who are going to be making the policy, the people who are going to be building the networks, the workers who are going to be out there, the new workforce that we need, the tens of thousands of people who are going to be building these networks and part of it, all of us together connecting everyone in America. It is a generational moment, and we want to partner with you all.
Well, those are truly inspiring words. There's so many questions we didn't have a chance to get. What can we do to get those answered later? What, are there people you would recommend that questioners?
Well, I have a staffer. No, I wouldn't say. We are gonna. That is a huge part of what we're trying to do. So I'd say, visit our website. There's a lot of opportunity for comment and for engagement with us. We're going to be in the weeks ahead. You can expect to see a lot more information coming out. The starting gun will be May 16th, but that's just, it's just the starting gun.
And before we thank our guest, I want to just remind our audience that every Wednesday at 12 noon, we're back for Broadband Breakfast live online. And on the second Wednesday of the month, we have Broadband Breakfast for lunch. You will have counterparts, including Chris McLean from USDA will be appearing in a future month. And we're hopeful to get Jessica Rosenworcel as well, as soon as she's recovered from COVID, of course. And on behalf of each of you, all of Broadband Breakfast sponsors and Broadband.money, we want to give Alan Davidson a wonderful thanks for spending his time with us.
Thank you. And congratulations, Drew, on this project that you've been ahead of the curve for years, and now it is really it's our moment.
Well, thank you. Very kind of you, Alan. All right, take care. All right.